Hi, I am Conrad Christensen. I'm a clinical psychologist who has been in the clinical field probably 40, 50 years. I founded what we call the Center for Psychological Services in 1975 and actually worked out of it for the past 40 years. Prior to that time, I was a teacher, administrator, school counselor, and before that time, many jobs that are not in the same category as this. The aspect of dementia and what followed were the two books I'm going to be referencing today was thrust upon us in the late 1990s. It was intense family involvement, and my wife was uh, uh, taken over by what you'd call a coexisting dementia, which one does not hear a lot about. The dementia and the two aspects or three of it were about a 14 to 15 year process, and I stayed home during that time and was her primary caregiver. Since that time, I have written two books, one on coexisting dementia, something you probably don't see very much in the market of books, and the second one is that of the primary caregiver. And a primary caregiver, especially in home care, plays a pretty key role in responsibility, direction of treatment, kind of treatment, much more so than if a person were in a public facility. A little bit about my second life, or I should say life before this life, was that of a young boy who grew up on a farm. Actually, it was three farms, and one of those three farms is the current place we have lived since approximately early 90s, and it's when we bought it from my mother in 1989, it actually was totally wild land plus a small amount that was agriculture, which was actually land that we broke earlier in my life. I was 5 years old when this land was bought, and I believe it was 1941. This 95 acres we call home resulted in our building all the buildings here, including an office building, and I was involved in other things. I've been a maple producer for approximately 30 years and have been qualified for many years as an international judge of maple syrup and maple products. We developed a retail maple store selling not only maple syrup, but anything related to the use of pure maple syrup or maple products in other kinds of recipes. Along the way, I developed a pecan business, and we went to Mexico and the Rio Grande almost every year, and that developed into a fairly good-sized business and paid for the trips actually every year that we went down there. One of my biggest creations, you could say, or one of the things I was most proud of in that whole period of our life was that of developing a recipe for maple glazed pecans, which caught on and is still called for quite frequently, especially at the holidays. In a way, I started out as a farm boy and are still a farm boy, but from a different point of view. I'd like to focus for a minute or two on dementia and aging. The questions that frequently come up is what is normal aging for seniors, and when is it over the line and you're actually into the territory of early stage dementia or symptoms of early stage dementia. The difficulty that is most prevalent is what you might call word finding. People having difficulty pulling the right word in a sentence or in a thought. And is that a normal manifestation, or is that something that crosses the line? The reason for difficulty in word finding is really a fairly normal thing. It is often caused by head injury or stroke or even major depression, and people tend to age with some difficulties in that, and it's a purely natural, normal phenomenon. There are other factors associated with normal aging, and one is walking tends to slow down. The stride seems to decrease in the extent of the stride. Stiffness in joints is pretty common and normal. Stooping when walking is also fairly normal. Word finding only becomes a problem when it really takes over and gets in the realm of difficulty to the point where the dementia is handicapping the person. But for the most part, these phenomena are normal. In the two books that I wrote, if there is an overarching theme that cuts through both of them, is the issue of awareness. If awareness can be an overarching theme, that is probably the whole purpose and underlying reasons that those two books were written. Awareness is a public problem at this time, especially, not so much with Alzheimer's, but certainly with Lewy bodies. And it is also an issue in regards to coexisting. And in fact, you don't really see a book. This is, I think, the first book I've seen that addresses the issue of coexisting dementias. And they are quite common. In a research study, over 54% of the people who had Alzheimer's had coexisting pathologies. And Lewy bodies was one of those. And so it's not really as common as you think. And if you are like I was at that time, I never looked for that as an issue, thinking one is all that you're going to have, until it became apparent you had to think differently. And then we did it almost all the way through without awareness. And I was the primary caregiver 24/7 for all those years, and into the 2007 and 6, things began to change so much. I had absolutely no awareness of those symptoms and what they meant. And that is part of the underlying passion, I guess you could call it. I don't know of a better word. I call it the thing. But it is actually that thing of awareness, which I did not really get a grasp of till the last year of my wife Sharon's bout with coexisting dementia, mainly Alzheimer's and Lewy bodies. And this thing I call, this issue I call the thing, is really the best word I could think of is passion. There's other terms that are used to define it, but it's kind of an emotional drive that a person can get when you endure many years of something like this. And it is an expression of feeling, deep emotional feeling and sincerity, but it's like you have spent these years, and so has the victim of the dementia spent all these years, and you have to endure that process, and it's like it acts upon you instead of you having control and acting upon your environment. And it's something that's easily moved to action on my part. And it's a deep well, and if there's any one thing that underlies all of this, it is that passion at drive. I've had many people ask me to write books about it, and I have no trouble putting that energy in. I can sit down in the morning and get right into it. It's like a never-ending well of emotion or desire to accomplish something. The state of affairs of dementia in America is something that I think if I were the one doing the grading, it would probably be a fairly low grade in terms of how things have progressed over the past 15 to 20 years that I've been involved in it. And of course, as a clinical psychologist, I did neuropsych testing, I did evaluations of many people with dementia, but never one with Lewy bodies. And still, it's the second most frequently occurring dementia in America. Number one is Alzheimer's. A writer and neurologist, Dr. Dale Bredesen, has written a book called Ending Alzheimer's. It's an excellent book. But he quoted, and I wholeheartedly agree, the state of affairs in our country relative to dementia is a sad one. Those were his terms. The Alzheimer's is the sixth leading cause of death, and there have been no new medications that are effective or have been effective since 2003. That is 17 years. Much confusion has existed publicly and through clinical circles about the word dementia. It's used generically, it's used with many kinds of nuances, and I think it's very confusing to the consuming population. Over half of the people who have Lewy bodies, dementia, are never diagnosed. Many more are misdiagnosed, and treatment is often not a comprehensive treatment. It's either a symptom approach or an overlapping treatment. It is rare. You will see comprehensive treatment in specialty memory clinics and specialty clinics, but not your average medical facilities, only the specialized. The lack of research is, I think, quite glaring. I would like to perhaps do a reading and cut the tempo. It's only 3-4 minutes, but it's right out of the book. And the book that it's out of is this one right here, which is Coexisting Dementias. And the other one, and these are very different books, they have similarities. This one was written first, and the next one is called The Primary Caregiver's Guide, and that is this one. And that is got a different focus, It's written different, the structure is different. There's 2 or 3 chapters in here on anxiety, depression, anger, aggression, which can be really formidable problems. But my focus for this next few minutes is a reading from the actual book. And I would like to, I think it tells a lot in a short hurry. The title of the page is sorry about the delay here. Okay, here I have it. The reading that I want to do is entitled Alzheimer's and Lewy body dementia. A neurodegenerative dementia is a dementia, in parentheses, a disorder that has an actual progressive path of decline with no treatment cure. Alzheimer's is progressive and irreparable shrinking of brain tissue with a loss of intellectual abilities. That really capsulizes the true meaning of that word dementia. Alzheimer's is a neurodegenerative dementia. There are many, maybe 150 different kinds of dementia that don't meet that category. That means that they have a path of decline and no cure. Many dementias in this other category have some treatments that are helpful. Alzheimer's attacks the cortex, mainly the parietal and temporal lobes. Those are back here. And the hippocampus of the brain, which is the center of memory, and it's in the center or the midbrain. Dying cells create plaques and tangles, destroying a person's ability to learn and use language with a never-ending loss of memory. The disease process is long. It takes, estimated, 18 to 20 years before impairment is severe enough to be diagnosed as Alzheimer's dementia. Without awareness, unknowingly, not even aware, a totally different neurodegenerative disease is brewing within the person. Cells are dying within the substantia nigra, in the center of the brain, just above the brainstem. The substantia nigra is responsible for movement. Totally different than your inability to think clearly. This is affecting your movement physically. So it's really a contrast. These dead cells are called Lewy bodies. They were discovered by Frederick Lewy in 1912 in the same lab where Alois Alzheimer discovered Alzheimer's disease in 1907. He called these dead cells debris. Lewy body causes movement problems to large voluntary muscles like arms and legs, as seen in Parkinson's. They also create problems as seen in Lewy body disease. They are referred to as Parkinsonisms. They do not necessarily affect large muscles, arms, and legs. They affect the autonomic nervous system, all the way from the brain throughout the body. They affect basically the autonomic system and create their havoc by interfering with the functions of those organs. I mean, you could start with salivation, you could start with vision. It can be the stomach, it can slow down the kidneys, it affects any of those autonomic functions. It takes about 10 years to develop a Lewy body. Lewy body is a family of disorders. The acronyms are DLB, dementia with Lewy bodies. So we're talking dementia, loss of intellectual skills with movement. And Lewy body dementia, and Lewy body dementia or disease. It's possible to have that alone, but in dementia with Lewy bodies, it adds more destruction to the intellectual function areas than did just Alzheimer's. And DLB refers to dementia with Lewy bodies, as I said, and PDD refers to Parkinson's disease. See, that's not a dementia alone, but they can morph into Parkinson's disease with dementia. And Lewy body refers then to that Lewy body disease. This is kind of a quick overview of the two areas, and it is an added feature when you now put in coexisting. You don't see it diagnosed that way. That coexisting is basically my term. If you go online, it'll be called mixed, but you don't see that very much practically speaking out there. And coexisting is really a new entity. You've got Alzheimer's, you've got Lewy bodies, and you bring that together, and they in turn interact, and you end up with a different entity. I don't know what you call it, but it is a new entity. And it in itself creates all kinds of symptoms that you might call unintentional consequences. And those unintentional consequences can be like syndromes or clusters of symptoms in and of themselves. And many of those are treated, they can be treated. You can help them. If the person treating it looks at the root cause and goes from there and sets up a comprehensive program and works at it that way. Our treatment tendencies in a specialty clinic may be that way, but normally it's more in terms of symptom approach or overlapping approach or focusing on certain troubling aspects of it. The two books that I wrote are really aimed at awareness, and there really is one thing I need to emphasize in the writing of these books. You will probably not see anything written on coexisting, as I said, but this is a unique perspective, because my perspective is looking at this. You can't just turn it off. Like 40 years working in a mental health clinic, doing testing all the time, you're looking at it from that point of view, and then you're also in it, being the caregiver, the primary caregiver, you're experiencing this. So I think it's a rather unique approach that you won't often see. And it is the actual experience that I think has been a big help. But you cannot just turn off your work as a clinician, because for good or bad, your spouse has to live with it, I guess. Anyway, I might say a word about the books, and then I'll close it off. The two books are Coexisting Dementia, and the other, as I said, is Primary Caregiver's Guide. That's really, I like that part of it, because there's so many decisions that you as a caregiver, especially home, but even if your loved one's in a professional facility, you gotta make some of those. You aren't gonna avoid it. You can't just turn it all over to somebody else and be removed. You're going to be thrust into that. And I don't mean by primary caregiver, I mean the daily tasks, yes. I mean all the work involved in that, and the ups and downs and the skills that could be connected. But I'm talking about more legal issues. The attorney, power of attorney, and when do you do this? When do you decide? Do you want to have this kind of treatment, or you're going to put someone in a nursing home, or you're going to say that things have gone so downhill that no longer can that person have a driver's license, or they can't sign for the materials that you need for medical care. There's a lot of those decisions. Some spouses have those prearranged already legally, but many do not. And that's what I like about the primary caregiver guide. That is not in the other. This book also has several chapters on anxiety. It can be a really impossible problem to treat. Most people that have Lewy bodies coexisting with Alzheimer's, over 64% end up going to the emergency room for help. And anger and aggression and anxiety and hallucinatory behavior and fluctuating cognitions, those are really demanding. Capgras is another one symptom that's really demanding. And those are experiences in and of themselves, but it tells something about the intensity of the emotional environment, at least how it can turn into that. Probably the biggest thing about the path of decline with Alzheimer's versus Lewy bodies, and it can actually turn right in the middle. The Alzheimer's is a gradual, steady decline. It's pretty predictable. It's you don't know what's next, but you expect something like that. And the gradual decline is almost like from hindsight, it's like a standalone disease. Lewy bodies isn't that way. First of all, the path of decline is like a roller coaster. It goes like this, and actually in the middle, it will change. When that takes over this, it'll actually change the path of decline to that, and that may last a thought pattern, fluctuating cognition. It may last for a day. It may last for 2 days. Many times it was a week. And then it would go into another phase, then another 5 days or something, go into a different phase. I go into great lengths in the book about that. I think I have several pages, and I think I've illustrated like 5 different patterns that are likely to occur. Anyway, I recommend getting both books because they tell you different things and they approach it a little different, but you will find that to get an overall view, and that's my goal, you will find it helpful if you do get both books. The cost of the books, I have a volume discount, and I'm offering those for $35 for both books, with $5 for shipping and handling, which is really quite a discount there too. So people can, if they order only one, it's $17.50 plus the shipping and handling. But if you are interested, email me at cps at tds.net, and cps at tds.net, or you could call me at 715-305-5113. And if someone's interested in a signing or a note along with it, I would do that happily. The things that you will learn is worth it, because you will have an awareness that many people do not have, that also have to go through that. You will find out what AD looks like and Lewy bodies and coexisting and treatments. So I thank you for your attention and appreciate it. Thanks. Till we meet again.